I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dye some glorious spinning fiber. The fiber is Nimbostratus by Paradise Fibers, a glorious gray merino and silk blend. And I believe the blend is about 75% merino, 25% silk. And you can clearly see the different fibers in here, from the gray merino wool to the way that the silk is blended lightly with it. It could be blended more through spinning or left to give some gorgeous barber pulling to it. But I'm very excited to dye this because not only will the gray and white take up color differently, but silk and wool take up color differently as well. So I think that when we over dye this, we will end up with a lighter, bright pop of color on the silk, maybe leaning a little bit pastel, but then a deeper, more saturated color on the gray. Paradise Fibers gifted me this fiber, but this video is not sponsored. And if you want to learn more about it, I do have an affiliate link down in the video description. Before I go start pre-soaking this stunning fiber, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my lab partner today, Ellen Kravitz. Ellen, thank you so much for being my lab partner for this episode of Dyepot Weekly, and I really hope you're going to love the fiber I'm about to dye up for you. I am going to pre-soak the fiber in some plain tap water overnight, because I want to make sure that the silk fiber is really well saturated so it absorbs color. If the wool and the silk were both white and we dyed this, I would expect that the silk would appear a lot lighter in the end. Not because it's necessarily going to absorb less dye, but to have the same level of saturation, silk does require more dye than wool to look as vibrant for the final color. But it's also possible that the wool will absorb more color than the silk anyway, so those two things together. But silk fiber takes a while to get wet, and you know that it's well saturated when the silk suddenly looks translucent rather than opaque. And so that's just why I want to have a lot of time. And so every once in a while, I will come and sort of press some of the bubbles out, but we're going to give it a nice long soak. To this pre-soak, I am going to add 100 grams of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes Peruvian Highland wool. And I'm adding this just in case when it is time for us to dye the fiber, I want something else in the pan. If it depends on how much surface area there is. And so I figured I'd pre-soak that just in case, but we may not use it, which means that it might be part of another video later on. But anyway, I will see you tomorrow so we can dye the fiber. It's been a little closer to 2 days, but now I want to transfer the fiber from the pre-soak into my pan. And I think I want to arrange it like this, the best that I can. So I'm letting some of the water drain out. We will be applying, oh dear, I didn't think some of this through. There we go, there's an end. We're going to apply the dye to the fiber while it is cold and then take it over to the sink. This should allow us to get some coverage. I could have removed more liquid. Yeah, maybe I should have pre-soaked it in the pan. But I do want to see how much space this takes up, and then we'll decide if we're going to add the other fiber as well or not. Yeah, you see, because how it's compressed in here, I think I do want the other fiber just to take up a little bit more space. No, maybe not. Maybe we'll just dye this one on its own and then use the other for another day. And it's okay that there's some space in between. So I'm gonna go set the rest of the fiber aside. I dyed a colorway earlier this spring that featured pink, red, and sort of like a deep wine color. And so that's sort of what I want to play with today. I'm gonna use some Cabernet. I need to remember that I'm only dyeing 100 grams though. We may end up with some leftover dye. Some Cabernet, some Deep Magenta. And then for a more red color, I'm gonna take some Deep Magenta and add some yellow to it. This is just some brilliant yellow from Dharma to make it from more of a pink to a red. And we'll have to do some tests to see if we've done enough, but actually that is pretty good for a red. And then we also have our Cabernet color and our pink. And so there we go. The red maybe could use a little bit more pink in it. Maybe I added slightly too much yellow. The colors are breaking a little bit on the paper towel, and so that is also something to keep in mind as we are planning out the colors. So it is a lot redder at first, but I think that that's pretty good. I just really love that colorway and really wanted to do it on fiber as well. We have a lot of dye here, and I do not need to use all of it. And hopefully I won't splash as I'm doing this, but I'm gonna fill up these cups with just some plain water. So this way we can spread these colors out onto the fiber a bit more. And since we have no acid in the fiber yet, I'm gonna go ahead and add some acid to these dyes. I'm just gonna add a tablespoon of white vinegar to each one. We may add more later on. And now here we go. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bumps. How do I want to do this? So that's, if that's that color, that is that color. There, that works. Okay. Just planning out my color placement a little bit. And some of these colors will spread beyond where I place them. I'm using a turkey baster to apply the color, but I'm okay with things sort of blending a little bit and moving around. That is not a problem. But the goal is to add these colors as much as possible onto the relevant yarn. And I am curious, yeah, it's not penetrating all the way, which is fine. I don't mind if we end up with some white, but we can also come and in these sections as we add the color, give it a little bit of a press. And so while that doesn't perfectly apply the color to it, it does help move it through. And there is plenty, so that way we can add more color to the other side. Now this does turn out to be much more of a purple color, but I have noticed that it does sometimes appear a little bit brownish when I first apply it. And I'm excited to see where we end up. So if I had had more fiber in here, then we wouldn't see the colors like running in between the sections, but I don't mind that because also as we add more liquid, you can see that the fiber is sort of growing in the volume that it's taking up within the space. And now we have our pink. I just thought that these colors would look really cool if they end up being bright or a little bit more pastel on the silk, but then they'll also all be a bit muted on the gray, which will be really, really pretty. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how this will dye up, because we have dyed on this channel blends of gray and white fiber in the past, and it's been beautiful. But I think that I haven't dyed one where the different colors were the different fiber contents. I've dyed blends, and we've seen colors take up differently in blends before, but this is a whole different kind of ball game. And as I press, the goal is to sort of press, but not to rub. I don't want to rub the fiber at all. And there could be some color transfer from my gloves, but part of the beauty of hand-dyed fiber is having some of that tonal variation that you can see. But now I do want to check and maybe add color to any spots that I feel like could use a little more. And so we will have some darker and lighter sections, and if there's some sections that are a little bit white left, that is okay as well. But we can at least try and get some coverage now. And I'm trying to move a little bit quickly so that way we don't end up mixing the colors from the different sections too much, but a little bit of blending is definitely okay. And I know I'm not going to use all of this dye that I've mixed, which is also just perfectly fine, but you can see in some places, you can see the lightness on the silk. And so I'm just helping it soak in a little bit more, both what I'm adding directly onto the fiber, but also then there is pigment in the liquid beneath. And so this is not a bad first attempt. But one of the big reasons for doing this, oh dear, one of the big reasons for doing this while everything is cold. Oh no, oh no, oh no. I don't know how much of it was on camera, but I just had the biggest spill I have ever had in my kitchen. And thankfully, when the liquid started running over the edge, there was a plastic bag on the floor there that caught most of it. And my floor is unstained. So I think that we're good. But I'm gonna go ahead and take this to the stove, and then I'm gonna spend a little bit of time off camera cleaning up. But when I spilled the liquid, it also went under the pan. So I'm trying to clean the bottom of the pan off as well. But anyway, this is exactly why I protect my work surface. I am going to turn the heat on medium-low. We have plenty of liquid in here, and I think I do want to add a little more acid. Just over these areas. I'm going to keep an eye on it so the heat doesn't get too high, and I'm going to check in on it periodically. Oh my gosh. Let's take a moment and talk about spills. Spills can happen, accidents happen. And this is a big reason why when dyeing with dry dye powders and working with that, I wear safety glasses and a respirator mask, because you never know when you might trip or stumble and toss dye in the air and you don't want to inhale it or anything. We're not using the respirator mask today because I wasn't using dry powder, but I bring this up because I have yet to find colored particles when I've wiped down the outside of the rubber respirator. And so that helps me feel confident that the techniques I'm doing are not causing a lot of powder in the air. However, it is better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to your lungs and your eyes. Now, as for your kitchens, if there's a spill of liquid dyes, the first thing to do is to try to wipe up as much of the volume as fast as possible, because you don't want that to spread over anything. And surprisingly, maybe I have one tiny dot on my shirt, but I didn't get any on me, which is amazing. Making sure you don't have, say, a favorite sweatshirt right next to where you're dyeing is also probably a good idea, just in case of spills. But I have found that if little drops of dye get on the floor, if you quickly wipe it up with a paper towel and wash with water, and then use, say, like a Clorox or Lysol wipe after that, I now don't see any evidence and can't tell where the drops have landed. And so I am very, very thankful that things were not worse. When it comes to storing dye stalks, I store them inside a secondary container. I keep it underneath a sink. And this way, in case one of these bottles fails, there is something to catch the color. And then sometimes you have a little bit of drips around the top of the bottle. That means as I am moving them back up to where I store them, that we're not going to cause like drips and spills and things like that as well. Thankfully, I don't have spills or messes happen often. I don't know if the reason why I haven't had more spills is part of my scientific training when dealing with liquids that often were very expensive, so you definitely did not want to spill, or if it's because I'm in my kitchen and I don't want to create a mess of color in my kitchen. But anyway, since this doesn't happen often, I figured it was worth talking about because therefore I can say it does not happen to me often. And so whether or not I'm lucky, I don't know. But it's also an opportunity to talk again about personal safety equipment. And the reason for having it is not just because of the process of what you're doing, it's because in the event of a spill or an accident, it'll make sure that you are protected. And so that is just important and why I recommend when dealing with dry powders wearing a respirator mask and things like that. But also, common sense comes into play, and maybe not putting a turkey baster that is full with liquid in a container, realizing that it's probably gonna tip, and it did tip. So, should have used a little more common sense. It's been 20 minutes. The heat is still on pretty low, and you can see that we still have color in there. In looking at the places where I can see water, I can see the dye. So what I'm gonna do now is get some tin foil to cover this. I probably should have done this from the beginning. And so this isn't gonna seal things completely, but it will help trap some of the steam here in the pan, which will make things stay warm throughout the whole thing. And so I'm gonna set a timer for another 20 minutes and then we'll come back and check in. But I am gonna peek from time to time to make sure things don't get too hot. It has been 20 minutes and I still see some color in the water in spots, but it is looking less pigmented than it did before. And if we peek here, yeah, so see there's some color leaking through there, but it looks like that those little bits of color might just be around some of those edge sections, which is great. And so I think I would like to add some more water. This is just some plain tap water. I don't think we necessarily need more acid, but I would like to increase the coverage of our fiber, and so that way we can help the rest of this dye to absorb. And so I'm not adding a lot of liquid, but just slowly in areas, and it should help the dyes just access more of the fiber. And the other thing I'm going to do to help is just do a little tip to help just let those colors move, those pockets with a little more dye, help some of that just move through a little bit. And now I'm going to cover it and heat still on low for another 20 minutes. Let's see, I still see a hint of some color in there, but I'm not gonna try to worry about it. And what I am gonna do is add some acid sort of just like over those edges, and I am going to put the cover back on and heat for I think 10 more minutes, at which point I will turn off the heat and let it cool down completely while completely covered. And so I am choosing to do this and waiting that 10 minutes just so it can get nice and steamy in there again to sort of trap that heat in and yeah, let the color absorb. But I will come back once things are cool. Let's wash our roving now that it is completely cooled. And I'm not seeing much color in the leftover water. I just placed the fiber into some water that already had some soap in, and I am going to let it soak here for a bit. But I see color. I see color coming out. So we are gonna let this soak for, I would say, at least 10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to gently pull this to the side, but you can see how much color we have there. All right, hopefully it won't be so bad. But I'm now adding water just to the side because I don't want it to run on the fiber. All right, and I filled it up all the way so that way we have plenty of water volume for the fiber to fluff open and for stuff to come out if it needs to. But this is looking significantly better than the last soak where we saw that color pretty immediately. So I still see a little bit, but I'm gonna let this soak for 5-10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. Slow and steady wins the race. All right, so we do still have color. I feel like it's less. So I'm carefully draining the liquid. And then we'll fill up the basin once again. All right, let's see. As we soak in, see a little bit. We're gonna cross fingers. And I'll be back after a little while. Slow and steady wins the race. And we're still having color come out. This is too bad. Ultimately, the amount of color we're seeing in the water is very pastel compared to the color that we have in the fiber. So we have that going for us. But let's do one more rinse. And then I will go ahead and spin the water out of the fiber. So if you're dyeing your own fiber and you see a little bit of color coming out, you can do a much more robust wash once it is spun because there's less risk of damaging the fiber. But it is possible that I just used a little too much of the pink, but the color in the fiber is not diminishing at all. So therefore, I'm not super worried. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. So I'm gonna put this through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and well, we'll take a closer look at the fiber once it's dry. But look at how bright the silk looks now. I'm curious if it's still gonna feel bright when it's dry. Ellen, this fiber turned out so pretty. The silk is so much more vibrant and saturated than I anticipated, which is amazing. Rather than having sort of the moodier wool with pops of pastel silk, we have moodier wool with pops of saturated and bright silk, which is super, super fun. There are a few light patches in the silk, which doesn't bother me very much when I'm dyeing fiber because as you draft, these blend in and spread out, whereas a little like pop of white on yarn sometimes bugs me a little bit more. Now, I do want to go through and just sort of fluff up the fiber a little bit. I think that this would still draft super easily, but it has been a little bit like compressed in some places. So I am just going to go through and do this, but I just wanted to show, ooh, that's a fun patch of red there, how easy this is to fluff, and that we're definitely like not a felted mess here. There, we are definitely fluffier. There are a few patches in the Cabernet where the color is so saturated it almost feels black. I wonder if that's just because of a lot of the Cabernet on a spot that was already gray to begin with. But yeah, I guess I just noticed some like mega saturated areas. This fiber looks so cool crocheted up because the different fibers in here give it this chevron appearance. This fiber was really unique for me to dye because as a blend of 75% merino wool, 25% silk, it's not completely blended together. There's no question that, I mean, there's blending in there, but It is not so blended that you can't easily see the difference between the silk and the wool. And so I think that this could lead to some really stunning effects when spinning, and really a lot of options when spinning, because you could choose to, as you're drafting, try to blend things a little bit more, and there's a lot of options here. And so I want to give a huge thank you to my lab partner today, Ellen Kravietz. Ellen, thank you so much for being my lab partner. I really hope that you are going to enjoy spinning this fiber. The week I'm filming these conclusions, I just shared a video where I was dyeing some 100% silk yarn. And I was just talking in that video how I want to play around more with dyeing 100% silk and trying to get saturated, vibrant colors on 100% silk. Because in the past, when I've dyed silk and silk blends side by side with wool blends, the wool absorbs so much more color and ends up being more saturated at a similar depth of shade that I just wanted to see like how much I need to push the silk. And so if that is something that you would like to see, please let me know down in the comments below. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I still get nervous when I dye spinning fiber, mainly because you do need to be more gentle with it than you do with yarn, because it's a lot more delicate and easier to felt. That being said, I do have a lot of fiber videos that will be coming up here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, so please make sure you are subscribed and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. And if you love all the content that I create, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. Every month, the ChemKnits patrons vote for the direction of the Dyepot PS series, and there are lots of other really fun perks. You can find more information at patreon.com/ChemKnits, and I will have a link down in the video description. My only regret today is that this fiber I'm sending to Ellen and I don't get to spin it myself. I've definitely spun lots of different kinds of like blends and things like that, but I don't know if I have spun, well, I know I haven't spun something like this that I've dyed myself. And so the possibilities are very inspiring, and so that just means I'm going to need to get more and dye more in the future. Thank you so much for watching.